Okay, well, just to be respectful of everybody's time, since it's now 2 minutes past noon, we're going to get started. So my name's attorney Allison Poirier. I'm an attorney here at Kahan Kerensky Capossela, where I've been practicing here for just over 7 years, primarily in the estate planning and probate administration departments. And the purpose of the webinar today is to talk about one question that I get asked pretty frequently, which is how to, when we're creating a plan, when we're talking about estate planning, caring for our loved ones, what if loved ones include your pets? And I've gotten this, as I said, it's a very common question that I get because pets are family. So when we're talking about caring for your family, that includes your cats and your dogs or your birds or even horses or whoever your pets are. It's you want to make sure not that you're not only providing for, again, maybe children or grandchildren or other family members, but also for those pets. So the question really becomes what is the best way to do that and what type of plan do you need? And a lot of that is going to depend upon what kind of pet do you have, because the analysis is clearly going to be very different for a dog or a cat than it is going to be for a horse. And I've seen all different trusts or all different plans, I should say, for all different types of pets. So that's really what I'm going to talk about today, share a little bit of my experience in terms of some of the planning I've done and some of the options that are available to you if you wanted to implement a plan to care for your pets. So the first consideration that you're going to need to, or first question I should say that you're going to need to answer is who is going to be the caregiver? Who is going to be the person from day to day is making sure that your pet is fed, walked, groomed, or generally whatever your pet is going to require on a daily basis? Who is the person that's providing that care? So maybe it's a spouse or significant other, maybe it's a other family member or friend. But when you're making that consideration, one, you're going to want to consider someone who probably has a very good relationship with your pet, which is probably goes without saying. But two, is also going to have the capacity to take on the responsibility. So even if it's somebody that you know has, and I'll just use a dog for example, because I find that that's one of the most common setups that I have is people looking to care for dogs or cats, is someone maybe have a really great relationship with your dog and loves being around them and playing with them and stuff, but maybe doesn't realize the extent of the responsibility of day to day, having that dog live with you and needing walks and taking them to vet appointments. So again, when you're considering, if you're thinking of a specific individual that you're going to be appointing to serve as caregiver, making sure, again, they're going to have the capacity and understanding really of what that responsibility means of taking in your pet. And two is if an individual person isn't necessarily an option, or there's not somebody that is really front of mind that you would want serving as the caregiver for your animal, maybe then we're talking about a charitable organization. So maybe it's a local pet rescue or some other type of organization like that is going to be willing to take on your pet after you pass, either to kind of care for them indefinitely or to locate a new home for them. And there's a lot of local organizations that do this type of work. I would say if you're considering that option, to do your research, because with all of these different organizations, they have different requirements. Some is simply just they want you to agree to certain terms and conditions and essentially enter into a contract with them that says you understand that if they're going to care for your pet, this is the type of care they're going to provide. This is what they need from you in order to do that. Some organizations may require you to also give them a cash bequest to help pay for the care that your animal is going to need. So, and again, maybe some organizations are specific where they won't, again, just hold on and care for your pet there, or it's really that they're seeking maybe to locate a new home for the pet. So really just do your research and find out what, if you're leaning towards one organization over another, what specific requirements do they have in order to provide the care that you're asking for your pet, or if they even have the capacity to provide the exact type of care that you're looking for. And again, with different types of animals. Obviously, the types of organizations may be limited within the state. So also think about if, you know, in a perfect world, you'd like your animals to be state local, but maybe there's a really great organization that's located in Massachusetts or Rhode Island or in some of the surrounding areas that might be able to provide really the ideal care that you're looking for your pet. So again, I wouldn't necessarily limit yourself to a specific geographical area if you're unhappy with the results that you're coming up with. So, but again, that really is the first hurdle is when we're talking about care for your pets. We really need to determine first who or what entity it is that is going to be providing that day-to-day care. Also, too, specifically, and again, with the organizations, I said you're going to get into a conversation with them and signing contracts most likely, or at least coming to an arrangement. So they're going to be very clear as to the care that they're providing too. But again, I can't stress this enough. If you're going with an individual, making sure that they're going to have the capacity, if you're choosing a friend or a family member, that they're going to have that capacity to provide the care that you're looking for, which really means not necessarily, I mean, if you prepare a will, it says, I appoint my best friend, Jane Smith, to care for my dog. You can do that without telling her. But again, I don't recommend that. You should really not only figure out in your mind who you think is best suited for that position, but make sure they're aware that you've chosen them and that they agree to take on that responsibility too. Because just because you've chosen someone to serve as a caretaker doesn't mean they have to accept. So I've had that issue come up more than once with caregivers for pets, or even to serve as executors or to serve in some other fiduciary capacity, where even though the person has been chosen in the document, when it comes time for them to actually serve in that role, they say they don't want to, or they're not able to. So just make sure you're thinking about that again, and have that conversation with the people that you're thinking of appointing to make sure that they're actually going to be able to serve as you intended. And then also it makes a lot of sense to have an alternate. So again, even if your primary choice right now does agree to serve as caregiver, 5 or 10 or 20 years down the road, if their health declines as they age, maybe all of a sudden that analysis changes. So to have an alternate named just in case is also a very good idea. And just to periodically review your plan. So every 4, 5, 6 years, however often you want to take your documents out and read through them, make sure that the caregiver you appointed is still the person that's the best choice. Or also maybe if pets have passed, maybe you've had new pets, join your family. Again, just periodically revisit those documents to make sure that the plan still makes sense. So now that you've chosen who is going to be the caregiver, the next consideration is, are you just leaving the pet in somebody's care, or are you also leaving money to fund the pet's care? So if you are leaving your dog or your cat to your best friend, are you expecting them to shoulder the full burden of all the costs that are associated with that? Or are you going to give them, again, a certain sum of money in order to make sure that they're not coming out of pocket for anything, and that you're really going to be providing for any possible need that your pet has, or at least to defray those costs? And that analysis, again, one, are you able to leave money? So you have to review your own financial situation to see if that's something that's going to be feasible for you. And if the answer to that is yes, then it's determining the amount of money that you're leaving behind for your pet's care. So again, this analysis changes vastly if you're talking about a cat versus if you're talking about a larger animal or an animal with health issues that is going to require a lot of care and maintenance. So you should really sit down and kind of create a budget, so to speak. How much do you spend annually on your pet's care? And then multiply that out by what you anticipate the pet's life expectancy to be. And maybe then that's you're in the ballpark of an appropriate number of funds to leave behind for your pet's care. And actually, I found there's really great information out there. I think the ASPCA has it. Several different financial websites that talk about creating budgets and such have addressed this issue. So there's a lot of resources out there where they have broken down these types of costs that are most typical depending on the type of animal that you have. So again, just defaulting to dogs and cats just because they tend to be the most common animals that I've implemented plans for. We're talking about vet visits. We're talking about maybe some unforeseen medical expenses as the animal's health declines. We're talking about food. We're talking about groomers or dog walkers, all of these types of things, leashes and toys and anything else, or even things like pet insurance, if that's something that you're interested in. Kind of calculating up all of those costs in a perfect world. If you were going to be able to provide everything that you wanted for your pet, what is the annual figure going to be to provide that care? On average, again, when looking at all of those things in these surveys that have been done of pet owners across the country, when we're talking about smaller animals, so as silly as it sounds, if you wanted to leave, maybe for some of you, maybe it's not silly for some, leaving money behind for smaller pets like a fish or a rabbit, obviously the costs are going to be less. So one of the surveys that I located said when you're caring for an animal like that, the cost on average, again, between all of those things that I'd mentioned, is probably about $65 a month for their care. When you're looking at cats and dogs, that number increases and the average tends to be anywhere between $100 to $150 a month. But with the larger animals like horses, and again, I keep using horses as an example just because I've had that situation. I had a couple that had several horses that were very near and dear to them. And horses have a very long lifespan, so they did really want to make sure the horses were taken care of. But then again, on average, now we're looking at more of a $200 to $300 or $350 a month budget just to provide the care. So again, kind of sit down, create a list of all of the things that you would want your pet to have, associate a cost with that, and then again, multiply that out by what you expect your pet's life expectancy to be. And then again, you're going to be in the range of the size of the bequest that you would want to leave. But I would also be wary to, some people say, you know, I think $10,000 or $20,000 is going to be sufficient. And likely, again, if it's just one animal, it very well could be. But then it's also taking into or planning for, well, what happens if your pet passes away and they've been in the care of this other person that you've chosen, and there's money left over in this trust. Does it then just go to the caregiver you've chosen as kind of a reward to them for being such a good caretaker for your animal? Or at that point, does it go to another pet rescue or some other charitable organization that is going to provide similar services to other people's pets? So again, you got to kind of think about that too, because so there's always the danger, one, that your pet's needs are going to exceed the amount of money that you leave. So again, despite how much money you think is appropriate, the money at some point may run out and your caretaker is coming out of pocket. So you've just done the best you could, and you've defrayed at least some of those costs for a while. But two, again, there's the flip side of leaving too much money. So I would say if you're putting a plan in place, think about both of those scenarios and what you would want to happen in each of those eventualities. Just because as long as you're crafting the plan now, try to put as many contingencies in place as you can to address all of those concerns. But also too, if you're thinking about a larger bequest, the next consideration of once you determine you want to leave a bequest, so you want to leave a sum of money for the pet's care, and you've now determined what the appropriate number is, well, how is that number how is that amount going to be managed? So is it something where you feel comfortable with just leaving, as I mentioned, for example, I've chosen Jane Smith as the caretaker for my pet. I've set aside $10,000 for the care. So when your will or your trust is executed, what's going to happen is the animal's transferred into that person's care and they're going to get a check for the money. And then it's just over your pet's lifetime, you trust that person to do the appropriate things with that money. And a lot of times that works out just fine. Particularly when you're choosing a trusted friend or a family member, or again, even if you're going with an organization where you've already had the details ironed out in terms of how the pet's care is going to be provided, that can work out just fine, just a straightforward bequest of a sum of money. But sometimes if you have maybe a little hesitant just to give the money outright, another option is to create a pet trust, where it functions the same as a trust that you would leave behind for if you have little kids or other family members that you're leaving money behind. It's really kind of making sure there's some oversight in terms of how those funds are going to be used for your pet's care. So it's not just, here's a check to the caretaker. I trust you. It's okay. This money is going to be available for the caretaker to pay for anything that my pet needs, specifically the care that I'm going to want my pet to have, but it's through a gatekeeper, someone who's making sure the money is actually being used to pay for vet visits and making sure the pet is getting the appropriate medications and other things and that they're going to need. So again, you're going to have that oversight, which really means that you're going to be able to put, whenever I talk about trust, it's really, the way I like to describe it is you're putting strings on this money. So you get to set all the rules for how this money is really going to be used for your pet, and the caretaker has to abide by that because they have this trustee, this person overseeing them. But it may also be, though, that your caretaker is your trustee too, which is fine. Again, that can work because one of the other components of pet trust under the laws of the state of Connecticut, the state says, well, setting up this trust for the benefit of someone, specifically a pet, how are we going to make sure that this trust is being enforced and these pets are really being cared for? When you have a human beneficiary of a trust, they can always raise the alarm and go to the probate court and say, I'm not getting the distributions I'm supposed to be getting, but pets obviously can't do that. So to solve that problem, there is a component in this Connecticut law that says there is supposed to be a trust protector appointed for these types of trusts. So kind of an independent third party that is going to be providing that oversight to make sure the rules of the trust are being implemented properly and that your pets are being cared for as, again, in accordance with your wishes. So all of this really, again, kind of circles back to the same point that I think I've made now a few times throughout the webinar today, is that you really have to think about the person that you're choosing and the amount of money, because do you need all that complexity if you're choosing someone that you entrust implicitly and it's only going to be $5,000? If you really trust that person and the money's not too great, then you likely don't need the complexity of a trust. However, if the size of the bequest you're leaving is a little bit higher, or again, you just want to be overly sure that the caretaker that you're appointing is actually going to be providing the care that you want for your pets, then maybe the trust is the better way to go. So those are really all the considerations that you should be taking into account when you're talking about providing care for your pets. And also too, if you have multiple pets, so cats and dogs and horses and birds, you can set up separate plans for each one. You can set up one big pot of money for all of the pets. That's the beauty of estate planning. You can really customize it however you choose. So once you figure out what animals that you're going to want to provide care for, and again, the amount of money and the care that you think they're going to need, you can really start putting those plans in place. I'd like to finish with just, whenever I talk about pet trust, there's one story that always comes to mind, and that's of Leona Helmsley, the huge socialite from, I think she was big in the 80s and the 90s, famous for saying, I think only little people pay taxes, which earned her the name of the Queen of Mean, the nickname the Queen of Mean. And she had millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. And when she died, she loved her dogs dearly, apparently, because she left behind $12 million for her dog's care, which outsiders thought was somewhat ludicrous and was actually challenged in court. And the court ruled against the bequest and dropped the amount of money that could actually go to the dogs, simply because the court's rationale was that there's no way possible that the dogs are going to have $12 million worth of expenses. So this was an exorbitant amount of money and that's not going to be used. So the court reduced it. So not that I think there's too many people out there that are going to be leaving behind millions of dollars to their dogs and cats, but it does just drive one of the points that I had made home of just be wary of leaving too much money behind, not necessarily because you're worried about courts coming in and reducing the overall value of money you're leaving behind for your pets. But again, it can, if nothing else, be a temptation to the caregiver. If you have a big pot of money here that's supposedly for the pet's care, there may be temptation to dip into it and to be spending that money on the caregiver themselves as opposed to the animal. So that being said, that is the information that I wanted to share with everyone today. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat function or into the Q&A section here. I don't see that anyone's posted any questions as of yet, but again, I'll give folks a minute or two to see if there were questions that they want answered. And also too, if anybody wants more information about what was discussed today, you can please feel free to reach out. All of my contact information is on our firm's website, so kkc-law.com. Again, I'm happy to discuss either via email or through phone or video conference if anybody does have some follow-up questions, or just general, if not necessarily focused specifically on this issue, just general estate planning questions. I'm happy to chat with you about those too. So again, please feel free to visit our website to get that information. And we just have some really great articles, not only on pet trusts, but other areas of practice here at our firm. We have a monthly newsletter that we do, so we have a whole library of articles on different topics. So please feel free to check those out as well. And I don't see any questions coming up, so I guess that will be the end of the webinar for today. Thank you very much for everyone for signing on. And I hope that you sign up for future webinars that we're having. I believe the next one is in 2 weeks and it is on cybersecurity issues. So please feel free to sign up for that as well if it's of any interest. And everybody have a good day. Thank you very much.